Okay. Let's talk about Joe Rogan for a second. Because I'm
Okay.
curious from your perspective as this is like asking an athlete about a fellow athlete. Like, there are only so many things that I know, and there are only
Yeah.
so many intricacies that someone on the outside could know. First off, this is the most simplistic question, and you could go whichever way you wish.
Yeah.
How do you feel about his show, excuse me, being branded as, the comedian doing a podcast and, considering I'm not trying to influence your answer here, but considering the people that he has on, the topics that he talks about, how do you
Yeah.
feel about him?
Well, so I was on the show about 10 years ago, and I
When it was in
really enjoyed
LA,
it.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really enjoyed it. I felt he was a great conversationalist. I felt that he was open about pretty much everything we talked about. We agreed on like everything we talked about, with the exception of he supports breed specific legislation when it comes to dogs, and I think that that's very silly because I think every dog is an individual,
Yep.
much like a human is.
Yep.
Um, and so that was something we disagreed on. I think that since then he has fallen into this hole of, it's weird because the left says they're inclusive, but when someone disagrees with you on one thing, you're cast out. And the right wants all the power it can get.
Yes.
And so if you agree with the right on one thing, suddenly they want you to be one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I see how someone who is a conspiracy theorist, which he always was, but like it used to be conspiracy theorists were just kind of fun and goofy. It was just people who would get high and go, "Hey, what if this is all a simulation?" And it's like, okay, that's a fun thought experiment,
Right.
but not, I'm sure this is all a simulation and here's why. Like that person's off the deep end. But I can understand how someone goes from one to the other. It's unfortunate. But also there are a lot of really wonderful comedians and thinkers and etc. who do his show and other shows in that orbit, but they're lost among the abhorrent. There's that phrase of, if 10 people are having dinner and one of them is a Nazi, then 10 Nazis are having dinner.
Yep.
That's what it becomes, because if you platform horrific thought, then then that's what you're doing.
So I agree with you. I saw an interview that Jesselnick did. I believe it was with Vulture magazine, I want to say. And he sort
Yeah,
of laid
I know the interview.
into, yeah, so like he laid into that idea along with Hinchcliffe, which I could ask you about in a second, but like he sort of viewed it as like, this is my thing that I love to do. And going on a platform such as that, he basically, this is my perception of what he said, that it was just like a huge circle jerk, that like everybody's going on there to just kind of tap into his audience, because that's the obvious strategical play when you go into that studio, but also not to ruffle any feathers, that you could have a, recurring segment or a recurring episode with him in the future. Why are you smiling?
I'm smiling because there is a company in New York. I think it's called Compound Media.
Okay.
It was created by Anthony Cumia, who formerly of Opie and Anthony fame.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like extremely right wing, under the guise of, hey, we're just saying things.
Right.
We're just saying that women shouldn't make as much money as men. We're just saying that black people shouldn't be hired, like things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And in New York, it is so difficult to emerge out of that comedy scene because there's so much competition. And I can think of a couple of comedians offhand that like were offered shows on Compound, started out those shows as, hey, all viewpoints are fine, and let's talk to whoever because it's interesting, and then went really, really to the right because it benefited them. Candace Owens used to be a left-wing activist.
Yep.
It's a grift.
Yep.
And there was a lot of radicalization in comedy to the right during COVID because suddenly our job was illegal. And because that became a political issue, which it shouldn't have been, there were comedians who were like, well, the left is telling me that I'm illegal and the right is saying, no, go do what you do. So then they started leaning toward the right. And because Rogan has this enormous platform, there are people who will lean in because it makes them money. And it's really unfortunate because this is the first time in history that you can really do anything you want for money. It's that phrase, do what you love and the money will follow, has never been more true. Because all you need is an audience. There are influencers in every profession. There is, there are nurse influencers. There are tractor salesman influencers.
Yes.
There are, you could be anything you want to be as long as you're interesting and you find your niche. And I mean, there are how to get pregnant influencers. There are how to stop pregnancy influencers. It's everything you can imagine. And the unfortunate thing is some people see it as an easier path and they just take the bump from it. And the thing that I'm proudest of in my career is who my fans are. Yeah, I got a couple of crazies, everybody does. But for the most part, I would trust an average fan with, I don't have a kid, but if I had a kid, with watching them during an emergency, I would trust the average fan of mine in my home. And now I'm not going to invite anyone over just in case. But I think that I've seen comedians who I know and love as people who have this, large, hateful segment of their audience. And I'm just like, aren't you embarrassed? When every now and then, when someone makes just a really hateful comment on my social media, whatever it is, the thing we kind of started joking about, my thought process is always thank God someone like that doesn't like me. Because if that person liked me, who the hell would I be?